In just over a day of recording this, Artemis 2 could possibly be launching from the launch pad in Cape Canaveral, sending the 4 astronauts, Weissman, Cook, Glover, and Hansen, to orbit the moon for the first time in over 50 years, 53 years. Apollo 17, 1972 in December. Anyone born after that has never lived in a time where humans have been around the moon, yet the legend of that epic time lives on. And the Artemis generation, our generation, everyone living today has the chance to be a part of it. So tomorrow, April 1st, 6:24 p.m. Eastern Time, we will be live on Today in Space. We'll be having people from the community, our friends, folks from around the world, and people who will be at the launch site who should be joining us. So it's going to be an epic time. Please join us for that. Again, as always, we want to make sure that you are aware that scrubs can happen, and it is April Fool's Day. So if there is a scrub, we will let you know, but we will be live at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to start covering that and having people on to bring their curiosity, ask questions, and of course, you can come join us in the chat. And if you're there in person, please let us know. We've got a link we can send you for you to jump on and join us on the stream. This is part 3 of NASA's Ignition program, which was released to us just last week before Artemis 2, and there was so much to cover that we had to split this into 3 parts. This episode will be long, but it has a little bit more of each talk, not the whole talk, but a little bit more of each, because this is where it really got interesting. This was the second half of the day. We start with Dr. Nikki Fox, Associate Administrator, Science Mission Directorate. If you love all the science and exploration that NASA is doing, that's a great talk. We've got our live broadcast part 2 that you can go listen to if you want to dive into that, but we've got a little bit of that. Dr. Nikki Fox had a great speech, and the way that she communicates is fantastic, so I kept some in there because she's just really good at what she does, especially if you love James Webb, the new Roman telescope that's going up there, and different things like how NASA kept an eye on 3I Atlas and what we're going to do to keep looking for life out there in our universe. Then it moves to Steve Sinacore, the program executive for Fission Surface Power, where they talk about SR-1 Freedom, a mission that will use nuclear power on board to demonstrate nuclear electrical propulsion for the first time. And it could be an interplanetary mission, but it will fly by Mars and drop off the SKYFALL mission on Mars, which will use the same approach as Perseverance for re-entry, but then drop a series of drones to explore Mars for water deposits and also places to land. That's a fascinating talk. I left a good amount of that in there because they talk about nuclear for the first time with NASA and space travel, which nuclear could be a huge unlock for space travel, as the amount of power you'd have with you and then thus thrust would be near infinite. So changes the game of space altogether. And then we rounded out with the NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman with his recap of the whole thing. So a little bit longer episode, but I wanted to give it to you in how it came across, because this really, they capped off that whole day tremendously. There's a lot coming, not just with Artemis 2, and we wish those astronauts and the team luck as they prepare to send these astronauts on a free trajectory around the moon and back safely. And that's just the start, because after this NASA Ignition program begins and we start building towards what happens next. So there's a lot here. I'm very excited to share it with you, and I'd love to hear what you think. Let us know in the comments. Make sure you're following us online. You can find us on your favorite platform by going to stan.store/AG3D Labs. And if you're following us on any platform, you'll find that link in our bio. And just stay curious, folks. Looking forward to seeing you guys on the live stream tomorrow, April 1st. We'll be live at 4 p.m. We've got a lot happening, folks, so thank you for joining us, and let's dive into the final part of NASA's Ignition program and learn what's coming after Artemis 2. We're back.
The universe is vast. Last year, the number of confirmed exoplanets passed 6,000. That means when we look at the night sky, more than half and likely most of the stars we see are accompanied by orbiting planets. And that means there is the possibility and indeed the probability of life beyond Earth. The science community tells NASA what its priorities are, and through a number of avenues, including the national academies, the decadals, conferences, and workshops. And when we go to those events, we aren't just presenting NASA's perspective, we are really eagerly listening to the questions that are asked and the themes that are top of mind. In fact, I've literally just come back from the National Academy Space Studies annual Space Science Week, where I had a chance to inspire that group with all of the great things at NASA Science. But before I close, I want to do one more big reveal. It is a brand new image from the James Webb Space
let's
Telescope.
go.
This is an infrared view of Saturn, and it's showing the icy. Yeah, I know. Wow, I know. I said wow when I looked at it on Saturday afternoon. It's glowing icy rings, the layered atmosphere, and several moons, including Titan, which is the destination for our mighty Dragonfly mission. NASA represents the best of what makes us American. Grit coupled with creativity, strength merged with empathy. We must continue to lead. The world deserves to have curiosity, innovation, and peace to continue to reign in space. There is no doubt that the past months have tested us. We've gone through a lot of change and much of it unexpected, but NASA has weathered periods of change in the past. This is our moment to be forged in fire and come out stronger with renewed commitment to our purpose. What I've laid out here today is a compass. It's a shared direction for how we think, how we operate, and how we lead the world in space. Over the coming months, we will redefine this vision together. We will integrate our teams more deeply around common challenges, continue to modernize our infrastructure and decision processes, strengthen science collaboration to improve speed and transparency, and engage our partners earlier and more strategically. I am deeply, deeply proud of this community of scientists, engineers, problem solvers, entrepreneurs, and leaders. I am so grateful to have a front row seat in what we accomplish every day, the jaw-dropping creativity and the teamwork that it takes. As we look forward to more discoveries in the coming year, including doing some truly mind-bending science on Artemis 2, I ask each of you to join me in remaining excited and focused on reaching for the stars, as only NASA can. Thank you very much.
Wow. That was great.
And once again, we're going to break for 10 minutes, so we will see you back in here then.
Oh my God, folks. This is absolute insanity. Never would I have expected to have all of this time with NASA talking to us, sharing what they could do. I mean, this is literally unheard of, but yet here we are. So we've got 10 minutes. I've got some notes here. I am going to try and go through those as we wait for them to return. First, the Roman telescope, that is amazing. It's so good to see that out there. And as an example, once again, that space exploration and development can be done not only on time, but under budget. It's possible. So then what are the factors that make programs too expensive and take too long? Makes you wonder. But to know that space telescopes are looking good, that they've learned from the mistakes and trials of James Webb Space Telescope, we're in great shape. That's amazing. And to go back to a little bit about this, I think the biggest concern from the mass amount of the space community, especially when this new presidency started, was that the budgets were going to cut this exact program. Everything that was being discussed here was potentially on the chopping block for the budget. This was before when Sean Duffy was the interim NASA administrator and there were cuts being done behind closed doors. So it really is an amazing parallel to see how far we've come with the new NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman, who was taken off, remember, during the first 9 months of this presidency. Jared Isaacman made it basically to the vote for the Senate, passed the Senate committee, and just needed to be voted in the Senate. Then he was brought back on later. And unfortunately, NASA had to experience and plan for potential problems, major budget cuts, and to see how far we've turned around with good leadership is shocking and fantastic. Andrew's comment here from the chat: that was absolutely beautiful, man. The future of upcoming missions. Science is and has been taking over fast. Us as humans have to start looking beyond Earth and the moon. We are doing just that. Absolutely, Andrew. If you're not already, make sure you're following Andrew at APA_Astro. You can see his link right there. Andrew's great, and we're going to have another Space Talker soon. We'll be able to talk more about this with the rest of our astronomy buddies. But space telescopes, huge portion of the science directorate, right? We also saw Firefly, right? Firefly is the successful lunar lander from the US with the CLIPS program. Intuitive Machines attempted it. Multiple different countries have attempted it. And Firefly is the clear winner. And looking at the math of it, right? NASA spent a third of what it usually would spend on a lander on a mission that happened on an accelerated timeline run by a private company and successfully managed to get their first ever attempt landing on the moon. That's huge. I mean, that's the power of the CLIPS program. And even in other missions like Intuitive Machines, right, that has had 2 attempts at landing, each one has gotten closer but has had issues. NASA was able to look at that risk and say, all right, we've had multiple moon landing missions. iSpace from Japan also tried a second time and was unable to land. But both Intuitive Machines and iSpace are continuing to have investments made in them because we need to figure out how to land on the moon. If there's one area in which China is farther ahead than everybody else, it's robotic landings on the moon. And that is a huge first step in making sure that humans land successfully. And when we're talking about the balance of how much work needs to be done in order to achieve that 10-year Artemis plan, 2036, where we have, multiple rovers and landed habitats, and we're starting to manufacture and 3D print on the lunar surface and all of that stuff, it's going to require many attempts at launching and landing. Again, back to the maker mindset and rethinking failure. And instead of trying, it's again, I was very angsty when I first started this podcast, trying to understand why the industry was going about it the way they were going about it. And for a long time, I thought it was a certain reason, but so much of it has to do with the approach and the trauma that NASA has had to deal with for not only losing human life again on Columbia and Challenger, but in dealing with a limited national interest and a limited national budget that from the taxpayers and doing the most that they could. So just like any kind of scarcity mindset, you're playing defense. You're holding on to resources and not taking the risks that you need to so that things get better. And so when you've got multiple moon missions and you've got one out of, let's say, 3 of those missions, right, that landed successfully on the moon, you still spent the same amount as one mission, and now 2 to 3 companies have experience at the moon and one was successful. So now you can spend the most money on the one that was successful. Intuitive Machines, even though they didn't successfully land, they got real close, and we just found out they were awarded a new contract. So that's tremendous. 2 American companies continuing to get funding from NASA for future missions because we're going to need a lot of landers for this whole thing to happen. And the other thing that was very well said, well, first of all, let's talk about the speech writing. I mean, it's like overnight, NASA got deep, and I mean, even the frames that they're using with the camera, the way they're setting up the shots, the way that they're communicating has lifted tremendously. I mean, it really can't be understated that NASA is improving in so many different areas. And one of the things that you could argue was the most difficult thing for them was making it interesting. It felt so dry. It felt very, this is nothing against public access television, but it felt very rough and cheap. Like they just didn't have the resources to tell people about what was happening at NASA. And in today's world, you need to be able to. You need to be able to communicate, especially online. And NASA's transformation is unbelievable. So, and then the speech writing, it just feels like it's at another level, especially the last speaker. I mean, she's been doing a great job for many, many years. Let me pull up her name here. Oh yeah, Dr. Nicola Fox. She's been doing a fantastic job. Was the coverage of 3i Atlas and even the use of the NASA fleet a bit of a stretch? Yes. Like the broadcast that they had for the 3i Atlas mission after being in a government shutdown and us not being able to use any of that stuff, like, again, thinking back to that was an example of NASA struggling and only playing defense, taking no shots on goal, as they continue to say. And what I'm seeing is completely different. Now, NASA, for good reason, is going to talk up the fact that we have this fleet of spacecraft across the solar system that was able to turn and take data and images of 3i Atlas. It's not enough. And that's what I love that I'm hearing the admission of this out loud by the NASA leadership. They want to do more. We just heard of a string of missions that they would love to do if they had the funding, that they probably don't. So instead of letting it get cut behind closed doors, they're saying, here's what we have. Here's what we'd love to do. But we've got to make some tough decisions, and we need to execute quickly in order to make the most with the taxpayer dollars that we have and the time that we have, 2 to 4 years, right, to set things up so that it can then reach the next levels. Go back to the chat here. Andrew says, 30 robotic landings on the lunar surface over a 3-year time frame using the CLIPS program is what makes us suitable for a continuing orbital economy and new scientific endeavors. He's absolutely right. You can't use the old approach of building the, I guess you could argue, the perfect. Perfect's always the sign of some kind of insecurity or something else. But if NASA could build its perfect spacecraft, it would be 3 times the cost of any of these robotic missions. And to have it done and launchable within the 3-year time frame, to get 30 of them, the old way just doesn't work. And that's the reality of the situation that NASA is in right now. And I love to see that they are pivoting. I love to see that everyone seems to be on board. We're together. There's a unity that's happening, not only from the leadership at NASA, but top down within NASA and all these private contractors and the industry that is around NASA, right? In the community. This unifying message of, here's what we have. We need to make decisions. We have our directorate. That's possible, and we've shown in the past we can do that with everything we did to get through Mercury, Gemini, Apollo. We can use what we've done in the past as a groundwork to figure out where we're going to go. Like Andrew says, 30 robotic landings on the lunar surface in 3 years. That's going to take a different approach than what we've used in the past. So, these are all great things. And the idea of the unknown unknown. There are things that you know. There are things that you don't know. And then there are things you don't know that you don't know. Right? That's the most, I don't want to say sinister, because it's not like they're inherently bad things. But that is the reality of being a human being, using a scientific approach and building complex technological things to travel the deep space of the final frontier. There is an underlying assumption that there are going to be things that you don't know, and you don't know that they're there. And for people that want to control every single thing, which is an understandable thing if you want to be in control of a situation, but science, engineering, my experience as an engineer and a maker is that is the constant. The constant is that you're going to face things that are unknown unknowns. And so that becomes a totally different way that you prepare as a scientist and as an engineer. You prepare and constantly build your skills so that when the time comes that the unknown unknown inevitably then becomes known, you have to deal with it. You can't spend all of your effort and all of your time building a perfect system and a perfect thing. You also can't do 85%. Especially with something as complicated as this, you need to get to 92, 95, 98%. But the last 8, 5, 2% of your full 100% knowledge of something is the thing that's going to take the longest or may be the most challenging part of the whole thing. And getting there was not easy. It's why NASA does the impossible. It's what they're built on. It's what we have so many amazingly talented people. And just, again, this can't be overstated enough. We're seeing them all get together. These are great times in that respect. And I really, really can't wait to see what happens next. I think we have one more speaker. I can't believe we've been streaming all day. This is insanity and also awesome at the same time. I'm going to take a quick break, turn my video off, and I'm going to throw the background back on for 5 minutes. We will be right back. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back for the last speaker for NASA's moon plan and NASA ignition. Nice little break. I don't think I've ever streamed this long before. I've been streaming all day, and it's awesome. I mean, it's all great stuff. This feels like going to a conference. Honestly, this is a lot what that kind of schedule is like. But this is a conference for all of America. It's kind of crazy what we're having right here. We have not gotten access to this type. If this was happening, if these kind of speeches and conversations were happening behind closed doors or in closed settings to contractors and fellow NASA employees, we weren't seeing it. And now we are. And just grateful that NASA is rising to the challenge that we need NASA and the American Space Program to rise to if we're going to go back to the moon. And more importantly, build deep space habitats and keep human beings going there and conducting science and improving technology so that we can do more, go to Mars eventually, and travel space and develop more. So, I mean, it's been so good. Yeah, Andrew, you nailed it on the day off, buddy. This is the perfect day off choice. I didn't even know this was going to be as intense as it was going to be. So I'm just ecstatic that life circumstances happened, that I'm able to, this year, after podcasting for 12 years, waiting for a moment like this. It takes me losing my daytime job due to a bankruptcy at the company in order for me to be here and be able to cover this as it happens. I mean, this is the next great space adventure, and it's happening literally right now. So I'm just super grateful to be here, and I'm glad you're here too. What a day so far. Can't get over it.
Welcome to the stage, Space Reactors Office Program Executive, Steve Sinacore.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So I want to start by acknowledging the incredible graphics team who put that inspiring video together. So we give them a round of applause, please do. And I want to personally thank them for giving me the challenge of presenting a static 45-minute PowerPoint presentation immediately after that. So we'll see if I have what it takes to keep the excitement going. You did, Jeff? Good dad joke. So I'm Steve Sinacore. I'm the program exec for the Space Reactors Office, and I'm responsible for delivering Space Reactor 1 Freedom, the vehicle you saw, the first nuclear-propelled spacecraft in human history to leave Earth orbit on an interplanetary mission. As Administrator Isaacman announced, the nation is getting underway in space on nuclear power, and we will start by flying a nuclear electric propulsion demo to Mars in December 2028 that will deliver an extraordinary science payload in SKYFALL. This effort will catalyze a sustained cadence of space nuclear missions that will power the future of American space exploration. And today, I'll walk you through why we use space nuclear power, how we do it, and who will make it. Next slide, please. Oh, we're already there. Let's start with the basics. Nuclear power in space does not just enhance deep space exploration, it enables it. Through increased energy density, nuclear power will keep lunar bases operating through the 14-day, 354-hour night. It will power the missions on the surface of Mars, where without it, the alternative is football fields of solar panels that will be ineffective during dust storms. And nuclear power provides the continuous, reliable, and plentiful energy that will enable surface manufacturing and the ability to make propellant on Mars that brings crews home. Future sustained robotic or human presence missions will require the energy density that nuclear power provides. Nuclear power also unlocks deep space. Past Jupiter, the sun is just another star. Solar cell efficiency drops to 4% at Jupiter, requiring extremely large solar panels, and it's effectively zero beyond that. And for deep space missions, chemical propulsion cannot escape its own mass fraction. These are not engineering problems. They are physics constraints, and nuclear power is the answer. Additionally, nuclear-powered electric propulsion spacecraft will move cargo in space like railroads move freight on Earth, with incredibly high efficiency compared to chemical propulsion. And nuclear also brings more innovation to the game, allowing for higher power, more thrust, and eventually exotic propulsion concepts that will open up the art of the possible for future exploration missions. So, why don't we already have it?
Oh, this will be an interesting answer.
So here's the record. The United States has launched one flight reactor, SNAP-10A, in 1965, over 60 years ago. Since then, more than a dozen flight programs have been attempted and over $20 billion spent to date. But the lack of an operational space nuclear reactor is not a technology problem. It's an execution problem. There are 4 failure modes that persist through all of these attempts. First, there was no sustained mission pull. The past programs were solutions to problems that were in search of a customer. And without a deadline, urgency waned and they were unable to endure. Second, there was a scope overreach. Past programs were flagship missions, initiated before the basics were proven. The poster child was GMO Prometheus, which was canceled at $400 million with nothing built. Third, there was a timeline mismatch, where development timelines outlasted political cycles, and visible technology progress lacked, causing programs to perpetually be vulnerable to changes in priority. And fourth, these programs had fragmented leadership. To execute, there were 5 agencies involved, with no single owner with budget and authority from spacecraft design through flight. SR-1 Freedom is designed to break every one of these patterns. Next chart, please. SR-1 Freedom provides a one-for-one response to each of these failure modes. It has a mission pull, with being Mars-bound under nuclear electric propulsion, delivering inspirational science. And this will be the first mission in a sustained cadence, not a one-off. The scope is right-sized, with an approximately 20 kilowatt, not megawatt class nuclear reactor. And SR-1 Freedom primarily has that one new system, the reactor, on a spacecraft bus that already exists. The timeline will match the need with the next Mars launch window in December 2028. Orbital mechanics does not negotiate, and the scope must bend around this deadline. And finally, with regard to fragmented leadership, NASA will be the prime integrator, and work closely with our enabling partner in the Department of Energy and any other entities to ensure all are working towards the same mission timeline. Ultimately, one manager and one office owns the schedule from design through flight. Overall, a fission-powered spacecraft carrying science to Mars is not just a tech demo. It is the first freight run on the transcontinental railroad of the solar system.
Wow.
It proves the U.S. can build, launch, and operate a nuclear propulsion system. SR-1 Freedom will close a 60-year gap in American space fission flight heritage. And along with our Department of Energy and industry partners, it establishes the regulatory precedent, the nuclear qualified workforce, and the flight-proven hardware that every future space nuclear mission will inherit. It is the foundation for everything that follows. So let's dive a little deeper into the mission specifics. There are 5 principal objectives that are deliberately minimal to ground the execution. 1, demonstrate nuclear electric propulsion. 2, launch in the next Mars transfer window of December 2028.
Oh, man.
3, leverage existing hardware for cost and schedule efficiency. 4, perform Mars-relevant science and transmit incredible footage back to Earth.
Yes.
And 5, maximize extensibility to future higher power and longer duration missions. We are not trying to do everything. We are trying to do the hard thing, which is operate a coupled nuclear reactor, power conversion, and electric propulsion thruster system beyond Earth orbit for the first time ever.
Yeah, that's hard enough.
With regard to the mission timeline, we will launch into a trajectory with sufficient orbital energy to escape Earth orbit, putting SR-1 Freedom on a path to Mars. Within hours after launch, the solar arrays deploy and the systems are verified. Within 48 hours after launch, the fission reactor starts, and SR-1 Freedom electric thrusters are powered by the nuclear reactor.
So the reactor doesn't start until
And after approximately 1 year, we reach Mars. Science is conducted, imagery is transmitted, and SKYFALL is released. 3 of the 5 core requirements are met within the first 48 hours of launch. We will enable science at the frontier and inspire the next generation of explorers through delivery of SKYFALL to Mars, which is an exciting new mission that builds on the success of the Ingenuity Mars helicopter. Targeting a future human landing site, SKYFALL will deploy a team of 3 helicopters to do landing site scouting and characterization of subsurface water ice. Next chart, please. After separating from SR-1 Freedom, the entry capsule enters the Martian atmosphere at hypersonic speeds, greater than Mach 5, slowing to approximately Mach 2. Next, a supersonic parachute deploys to slow the capsule further. And finally, the heat shield separates and the helicopters are released in a first ever mid-air deployment. The SKYFALL helicopters will carry cameras and ground-penetrating radar to scout a future landing site to understand the slopes and hazards for human-scale landers. They will also map and characterize the subsurface water ice to find out where the water ice deposits are, along with the size, depth, and other important characteristics. In addition to this incredible mission, we're going to explore other opportunities, such as student-led science payloads, to further engage the next generation directly.
Wow, 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 wow.
Please welcome to the podium Administrator Jared Isaacman.
Okay. Quite a day, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a few slides to take us through at the end, and then we'll wrap things up. And shortly thereafter, we will have we will host a press conference, because I imagine there's a lot of questions that people may have. So, we can talk about all these, really transformational endeavors today, the real exciting stuff, returning to the moon, building a moon base, lots of great science, multiple commercial space stations someday, building a nuclear powered mission. There's a lot of little things that have to happen to make it even remotely possible. I mean, not to mention the whole workforce. We've got a few thousand ideas, I would say, if we can go to the next slide, that have come in from that workforce we're going to talk to you a little bit about. And that's why I began kind of my journey in this role visiting every one of the centers and undertaking this grand information gathering campaign. What's working right here at NASA? Because we want to do a whole lot more of it. And what's slowing us down? What are some of the obstacles and challenges that are impeding progress, so I can help you clear it? And I'm going to share with you right now a little bit of some of those updates along the way. So first and foremost, restoring some of NASA's core competencies. What I found, and this probably surprises some folks, about 75% of the NASA workforce is made up of contractors, and that's not when we say we buy something from a Boeing or a Lockheed and counting their workforce. That is our workforce. About 75% is contractors. Wow. And some are in areas that make tons of sense. Cybersecurity. I don't think NASA was created as an agency to be the best at cybersecurity or IT systems. That is a great area that we should be relying on a strong contract workforce. There's other areas like turning our launch pad after every launch, where you might say, is this one of the reasons why we're not able to launch at the cadence that we once did during the Apollo era? We should probably restore some of those competencies in-house. Mission control, I'd say, would be another good example of it. So in terms of our workforce, one exercise that we have underway is converting a lot of contractors back into civil service. Then I would say also there's an opportunity to grow and mature some of the young talent that comes into NASA. Now, very fortunate for us, NASA's got a pretty recognizable logo all around the world. There's a lot of kids that want to grow up someday and join and contribute to the great endeavor that we are undertaking at NASA. Hopefully a whole lot more when they start seeing us go around the moon and return to it in the near future. But how do you grow and experience some of that talent, especially when we're not the only game in town? There's a lot of expertise in industry, and this is where we've partnered with OPM to create NASA Force, which is a component of their tech force. This gives an opportunity for industry to contribute some of their experienced talent, come into NASA as a term-based appointment, help elevate our younger talent that's coming in from our internship programs that have maybe experienced NASA through some of our grant programs, want to come here and bring some of that expertise that we're going to need, serve your country, and go back to industry, and vice versa. The same applies and allows some of our younger talent to go into industry for term rotations and bring some of their experiences back to NASA. So this is underway right now. As I often remind our team, we will be measuring success in this in the thousands, not in the hundreds. And achieved in, again, months, not years. And along the way, it actually frees up quite a bit in terms of resources for additional science and discovery. Next slide. President Trump's one big, beautiful bill afforded us a $1 billion investment to modernize our infrastructure. This has been a problem at NASA if you've been following along for quite some time. I had an opportunity to go around and tour some of our facilities. I stopped at one center and there was a sign on the door that said, "Do not enter asbestos." And then I went to another center and there was a sign that said, "Do not enter asbestos and snakes." So I'm incredibly grateful for President Trump and our representatives in Congress who have given us the resources to start making some very targeted investments, and we're already deploying those resources now. One I wanted to highlight specifically is a modernization initiative at Ames for our ArcJet facility, which provides absolutely essential capabilities. One, helping us understand some of what we observed during the Artemis 1 heat shield, so that we can incorporate improvements going forward, not to mention contributions across industry when we're talking about things that we can maybe bring back from Mars someday and what that reentry environment might be like, not to mention if we're going to and from the moon with great frequency in those high velocity reentries, as well as supporting some of our other partners. So this investment in infrastructure is underway right now. I think we'll have a lot more to talk about. If you go to the next slide, you'll get a little bit of a sense of where we're starting to allocate these resources across our various centers and help rebuild some great infrastructure. But unfortunately, a lot of it was built at a time when, again, NASA was the only game in town in the 1960s. And it's time to ensure its ability to support the missions of today, as well as those in the future. Next slide. Brief update for those not aware, NASA on average every year allocates about $1 billion in grants. This is a great opportunity for, again, kind of college students, those in university, to potentially get hands-on with hardware, ideally a whole bunch of instruments that we're going to require, not to mention tech demonstrations for construction of our moon base, ideally get inspired, drawn further into what we do here at NASA, and come maybe join the workforce or industry in the not too distant future. Next slide. So this is what I was referring to early on. You go and you visit every one of the centers, host a lot of town halls, you can hear directly from the workforce. Again, a lot of things that are working really well. We've tried to incorporate that as we evolve our strategy. Things that are not working well, do you want to learn from, fix, better do, so you can better enable our very talented workforce. But in addition to that, we've set up a number of opportunities to submit information back to NASA, one of which is just a simple suggestion box. Put it in my end of year note from the end of last year. There's over 5,300, I believe, submissions that have gone into it, not to mention hundreds of submissions for policy and regulation that slows us down. Again, might have been extremely relevant from decades past, no longer relevant today. And we are implementing these across a number of workforce directives. We've already put several out. And I would say also that we've drawn input from industry as well. We've gotten, I think, somewhere close to perhaps 50 or so submissions from commercial partners as well on how we could reform some of our acquisition procurement process, insight versus oversight, and working with industry to help shape some of the requirements as opposed to being overly prescriptive. So bottom line is we're listening to our workforce, we're listening to industry, and we're trying to take this feedback because we recognize without it, we're not going to be able to do any of the exciting things that we spent the first half of the day talking about.
Love it.
So as I mentioned before, NASA is no longer the only game in town, and we don't have exclusivity on all the good ideas. So we welcome industry's input. We've made reference to it several times today, in fact, from science and technology instruments. I mean, we are going to have so much payload volume opportunity across all the various landers and rovers going to the moon. Give us some of your good ideas. We asked about feedback across the CLD program. We asked about public-private partnerships for new great missions of science and discovery, whether it's planetary science, science as a service. Some of these have RFIs. A lot of them don't. And this is your opportunity to be able to come in and give us feedback, submit unsolicited proposals on our front door. And I can assure you we will evaluate them and give you feedback and ideally implement many of them. Inspiring the workforce, one of my first things I put out was the ability to recognize, reward, and inspire directive to the workforce. We have a small Air Force at NASA, their aeronautics portfolio. It's something we're hoping to talk to you about a little bit later this year. It wasn't specifically one of the highlights today, but we certainly have not forgot about the first big A in NASA. And we can make great use of these aircraft to reward our workforce for contributing to extraordinary outcomes, not to mention inspire the next generation in between our various rocket launches. Fully expect to see our aircraft at various air shows, which goes to the next slide, rocket launches, public events as we celebrate America's 250th birthday. You see some pretty interesting ones.
Oh,
I
look at
expect our Super Guppy to have an appearance at Sun and Fun, and ideally Oshkosh later, and perhaps maybe an event at Kennedy Space Center later this year. Next slide. And then it's absolutely foundational to everything we do at NASA to inspire the next generation to want to grow up and contribute to this great endeavor. And we have a number of very exciting programs that are underway right now. You can learn more about them on our website, including if you want to potentially come someday and contribute as an intern to NASA. So next slide. As I mentioned earlier, we get some 270,000 applications. Pretty exciting. A lot of kids want to come and work at NASA. We select about 2,000 annually, and it's considered one of the most prestigious internships 5 years in a row from Vault.com. And the next slide, understanding how we communicate today. I mean, I mention this all the time when people say, does everybody understand that we're about to return to the moon like they did in the 1960s? I'm like, well, there were 3 TV channels back in the 1960s, so it's pretty easy to captivate everyone's attention. It's a little bit of a different world today. I have no doubt as Artemis 2 leaves the Earth and makes its grand journey to the lunar environment, it will have everyone's attention, but it'll also have their attention on Netflix and every other good streaming application that we can partner with to make sure that we are communicating our message far and wide. Next slide. Okay, so a bit of a recap for what we covered today.
Shoo.
We started with returning to the moon. A lot of this was previously covered early or in late February when we had to bring Artemis 2 back to the vehicle assembly building. We decided to pull forward. We felt we owed it to the public at that point in time to say, not only are we going to tell you our path to getting Artemis 2 back to the pad, but what is the more achievable approach to returning to the moon? We talked about standardizing the vehicle with respect to the upper stage, rebuilding core competencies so we could turn around at the pad faster, adding another mission in 2027 to buy down some risk, which is Artemis 3. And then today we talked about how we were, well, one, we should have sent you a message too about our ability to actually pull in some of the schedule with hardware updates across all of the Artemis programs, but also to give a demand signal after Artemis 5. We're going back to the moon. We're going back to stay. That is going to require frequent and affordable missions to the lunar environment, two different pathways, eventually targeting crewed landings every 6 months so we never give up the moon again. And when we get there, we're going to build a moon base. I think this is very exciting talk about, to do it in a very logical way, a whole phase of experimentation. We never tried to build an extended presence outside of Earth before. This makes sense that we might want to do a lot of testing and experimentation to make sure we figure it out before we start building the grand infrastructure. What better way to do it? Work with our commercial partners that have already been experimenting under the CLIPS program, LTV program, get lots of landers, lots of rovers. Let's start experimenting power, communications, mobility, surface improvement, and let's pack it with as much science as the payload can possibly afford. Really evolve from, again, bespoke, infrequent missions to a templated approach with great frequency. You're going to see some of this activity in late 2026, but to really get into a rhythm starting 2027, and let's get those comm relay and observation satellites up there and bring the whole world along for the ride on the Moonbase website. We talked about staying in LEO. A very real reality. The International Space Station is an extraordinary achievement, 25 years plus of keeping human beings alive in the incredibly harsh environment of space. It cannot live on forever. We know there is an end date. That is something we are going to work with our partners on that can contribute to the International Space Station. We gotta work with industry. We're very open to the original pathway. Tell us how to make it work. We're there. We shared with you our concerns. Tell us how you're going to make that work. Alternatively, here's another approach that maybe takes it in a more phased approach. Leverage the International Space Station while we have it. It's a great pathway for additional crewed missions, cargo. We have the kind of the operational and technical maturity already to help industry evolve until such time as the market that we all know is inevitable will be realized, detach away, and hopefully we're all living in a world with multiple space stations. We have to do something to help in that regard. We're not going to sit on our hands, hope the orbital economy materializes. Where we said we're going to go to 2 PAM missions a year where you can sell the commander seat. Heck, maybe NASA buys the commander seat. I mean, that is kind of the right way to help ignite an orbital economy and not force it in place. Any of the research that has the high commercial potential, if we don't already have it in our pipeline, people were discouraged of giving the good ideas, the pharmaceutical capabilities that are gonna cure cancer or change the world, 3D printing organs. I don't know what it is. We got a front door website that was just a couple slides earlier. Submit the good idea. We want to hear it. We want to do everything within our power to ignite that orbital economy. Nikki gave an unbelievable update on science. She certainly has the best content to work with. There's no doubt. Her imagery was incredibly inspiring. So we gave you updates on some of our flagship missions. You've got Roman launching before the end of the year. How exciting. 100 times the field of view of Hubble, potentially upwards of 1,000 times the scan rate, going out and looking for the secrets of the universe. If you haven't seen it already, we actually have a mock-up of Dragonfly out in the lobby. So again, the nuclear-powered octocopter to search for life on Titan. That's a pretty exciting mission. Rosalind Franklin's coming up. We're actually going to have, think about it, have 3 nuclear-powered payloads that are going to launch in 2020, or payloads or spacecraft that are going to launch in 2028. Rosalind Franklin, Dragonfly, and SR-1 Freedom. Pretty exciting to think about all in a short period of time. We acknowledge there's got to be ways we can do science more efficiently. Time to science absolutely matters. The cost associated with it. We have a very good budget here. There's a lot of unfunded scientific missions that Nikki talked to you about that we'd love to undertake. We either will find the efficiencies internally to figure out how to pursue them, or we welcome public-private partnerships. We talked about Eric Schmidt and his foundation, the $1 billion he's contributing into planetary science. Others have reached out as well. Two other organizations reached out and said, how do we partner with NASA maybe to pursue some of these unfunded science missions? We absolutely love it. Surely there has to be ways, whether it's when you already have constellations of satellites being produced through factories now for various Earth observation capabilities. Is our RFI going to yield any updates in terms of new scientific instruments that can be incorporated to potentially close out the gaps with some of the more expensive or bespoke satellites that we have historically purchased to get after that data? Again, whether it's Earth observations, space weather, and free up additional resources to pursue some of the missions like Dragonfly that if we don't pursue, maybe no one else will. And then getting underway under nuclear power in space. So I find this very exciting because I think this fits squarely into what NASA is meant to do. The near impossible, again, what no one else should be able to close a business case on. That's where NASA should put our efforts. Now, for sure, industry is doing an absolutely fantastic job. Launch, observation, communication, chemical propulsion. This is what we want industry to be doing. Competitive dynamics, improving the quality of the capability and bringing costs down. That's what we want. We should then shift our attention to what no one else is capable of doing. I think the rationale there that is we want to inevitably explore farther out into the solar system where solar loses its effectiveness. This is where you want nuclear power. If you're trying to build a base on the moon, you're going to probably want nuclear power there to manage operations and keep our rovers moving in the shaded area. Certainly, if you're going to send astronauts to Mars someday, you'd really like to make sure they come back and tell us about it. Having a nuclear reactor on the surface to help with in situ resource manufacturing that we ideally already proved out on the lunar surface is going to be pretty paramount. I also call attention to that when every one of these slides is meant to convey something like really exciting, transformative, but inherent with every one of them is also a challenge, a problem, things we got wrong, real dollars that were lost, years lost. So when a lot of people ask us, how are you going to be able to do all this within the resource you have available? And I continue to tell them, NASA does not necessarily have a top line problem. We get a lot of resources. We may not always allocate them that efficiently. Steve talked about SR-1. One of the first slides says we've spent $20 billion on dozens of failed nuclear power and propulsion initiatives. It's $20 billion that could have gone to other great science and discovery. Last year we spent $250 million keeping a canceled science program canceled. There's examples across every one of our mission directorates where we probably could have repurposed our resources a little bit better in the direction of science and discovering. We're challenging ourselves to do that across the board. And I have no doubt when we do find these things, we're going to be able to take on even more exciting challenges ahead. Now, back to SR-1. We are making use of a lot of hardware that we already have while working alongside industry. I think this is extremely important. You don't want to pursue the 100% solution out of the gate, or you may very well wind up with another canceled program that maybe ran out of money. Nautilus was originally built to be a diesel boat. I think Hyman Rickover referred to it as the 70% solution. Well, it was the 70% solution that gave birth to the nuclear navy. And I think we're on a similar path right now. And along the way of just proving out those important capabilities in the first 48 hours after the mission launches, we are going to get to Mars and drop off a pretty inspiring scientific payload, send back also a lot of other imagery and data along the way, including some student-led science. The last thing I'll say, I don't expect any of this to happen on its own. The whole point of today was not to come and give you a bunch of great PowerPoint and then just sit and wait for it all to come to fruition.
Yep.
It's about action right now. It's why we're dropping RFIs. We want to hear back from people. Not weeks from now. We want to get moving. This is why we're having breakout sessions tomorrow. We're going to be available to have these conversations. Why we repeatedly refer to embedding our workforce, our subject matter experts, with every one of our vendors that needs it, every one of the subcontractors, again, every component on the critical path in an active role to help. And we know we are part of the problem in a lot of these cases. Like, we've got a lot of dated policy, things that maybe, again, made sense long ago, not always today. So let them take an active role and say, this is the right approach. Industry is telling us the way to achieve our objective. Let's let them do this. Or, hey, the supply chain's broken here. We got to build this valve. I don't know what to tell you, but we're not getting back to the moon if we don't do it. Great. That's why we're going to embed our workforce to do it, to drive outcomes.
Space business.
So, lot to cover right now. I'm sure there are a lot of questions. I appreciate everybody sitting through all of our presentations today, hearing from us. We can't do this without you, from the workforce to our partners in industry, and especially our international partners. We don't ever do this alone. We do it together. We're going to change the world together. So thank you.
Wow. This is insanity, man. Heather, you made it just in time for Jared to close out. But oh my God, the speeches today have been incredible. Heather, make sure to check this back. This has been a really amazing day for NASA and just the overall space program. All right, let's go through the notes. I have a few thoughts. That I can share. No, that's not what I want. This one? Yeah, sure. We'll do this one. Okay, so what a day. We found out what's happening after Artemis 5, which is the Maker approach towards developing technology on the moon, take way more shots on goal, which is the terminology they used, and a realization that NASA's budget, in what it has and what it could potentially have in the short term, is limited as to like what can be done, right? Like they just finally addressed a lot of the truth of what needed to be said at NASA, just the reality of the situation. So those are all great things. If we're going to get better, if we're going to grow as NASA and the US space industry, and to reach the moment, which is that we have another country, China, who could beat us to the moon. And if we lose the trip to the moon, what else do we have? And before today, before NASA admitted that in some ways they are the problem and they want to fix that, talk to industry, share the challenges, does what NASA does best as the experts, lay out the truth of the situation and provide some plans. When you look at it after today, you see all the amazing stuff that NASA is still doing, and a reality of the difference between the US and China, in that China's private and space program from the government, they're the same. And so this is an American way of combining NASA, the public side of things, the government side of things, with the private industry. And they mentioned something called time to science. And I think that's a great way to look at it from an academic, from a scientific and engineering perspective. Sometimes in businesses, you can get caught up in this may be the scientific way to do it, but we're profit driven and we need to do this. NASA has a similar problem, but also has to move at a rapid pace because it's taxpayer funded, and without a plan in place or a plan with action set aside to make sure that it happens, and NASA fixing its issues, it's not possible without speed. And you can still have speed and do science. They mentioned the 70% option, where it was 70% done for a nuclear reactor flying in space, and then that ended up becoming the research foundation for the Navy nuclear fleet. So it does not need to be 98, 99, 99.999% complete or capable. You can get a lot done with less and move the needle faster, right? It is about getting these milestones done. So Jared Isaacman just laying it out and breaking it down and saying it in a way that excites people. I really think that can't be understated from today's talks. The NASA leadership is charged up. They're ready to talk. They're ready to share and figure out who's going to help us do this. We have all this. It's up to us, not just as NASA, but the entire American space industry to pick up the pieces. And the great way about the way they're doing it is it doesn't mean that just one contractor wins and everybody else loses, which unfortunately has been the way NASA funding, in a large part, has gone. So we've seen that there's a ton of reason to develop things. And more importantly, one of the biggest problems with space travel, which is they outlined most of it's solar power driven. And if we're talking about deep space, we're talking about interstellar travel, or even just long-term duration, even on the surface of the moon, to survive the dark periods in shade, you need something other than solar power. So you need solar power for the surface of the moon because you need to survive the night. But also, if you're doing anything past Jupiter, solar power is not enough. And they were saying solar power drops to 4% at Jupiter and then is essentially zero after that. And when you think about Jupiter in relation to the outskirts of the solar system, it's not that far. So solar can't be the only thing, and right now it is. And what I love about SR-1 is that it tests the current nuclear capabilities, puts it on a spacecraft that tests, can we get nuclear electric? Can it be done? Can you run a spacecraft like that? And then sending those missions to Mars on its way by, which would set up the groundwork for nuclear to be a part of space travel as a power source. And those working in conjunction, the 2028 timeline, by 2030, when it would be needed on the moon, it would already have been tested and we'd have data. So a really great day. If you guys have anything to add in the chat, please let me know. We have been streaming basically an entire workday today, and it has been glorious. I have to somehow chop this up into podcast episodes. I think we'll just pick topics, and maybe we'll I don't know, I have to figure it out. But if you have any suggestions, please let me know. But a 7-hour podcast does not seem like something people will ever listen to. So for those that were here live, you guys got the best part. Heather, welcome back. Andrew, thank you for joining us all day. A big shout out to everyone that has hung out with us as we learn NASA's plan for the moon, but also plan for the future. I see a lot of greatness. They're going to spend the rest of the day, week, meeting, getting these vendors and contractors and people involved in the space industry to talk about not only the challenges, but how they might be able to help out and build, right? This is a builder's approach to a NASA program. And again, if you haven't read NASA Administrator James Webb's kind of history, I would go back and look at that, because I said this before today, and now I'm even more convinced that Jared Isaacman is our next James Webb, and he's figuring out a way to accelerate NASA's milestones and progress of not only setting up the first deep space habitat on the moon, but finally getting nuclear in space and getting a demonstration done, allowing for all of the stuff that's happening with NASA science and heliophysics, and not only just on Earth, but of understanding Mars and its atmosphere, and deep space telescopes, brand new ones going out, and then just opening up the field for people with ideas, companies, individuals, people with the means to develop technology or missions or things. They are finally, the doors are open, if you will. So this is a great time. Oliver Danny 1, what's going on Twitch? Good to have you here. Andrew says, that was an insane day, man. NASA brought our confidence back. We needed that more than anything. I totally, like, I was running around between, during lunch, between these broadcasts and just jumping up and down like a kid. You know, it's 12 years of following this, and on the sliver of a hope that even though at that time, 2014, people didn't even know what NASA was doing at that time. And honestly, even before, yes, Artemis 1, 2, and 3, but even before today, there wasn't a clear mission plan. You can go back and look. There was not a clear directorate on what NASA should do. And then, not only a directorate, like, you can tell people to do things. That doesn't mean it's going to get done. There's a sound plan, and I'm elated, but I'm also exhausted. I've used so much brain power today, but it's been awesome. Let's see. Hang On Physics was talking about how he's working on a new equation, which is very cool. We got an astrophysics question here. So space-time adheres to the core. Does this mean the core S mass is actually just trapped energy? So I think you're talking about the question you're having that, the equation that you're working on that estimates space-time using the mass of the core. So you can estimate things about planets. Yeah, I mean, the core of any planet, even gas giants, is concentrated mass and energy. So potential and kinetic, right? So, I mean, if space-time is bound to mass, which we know it is, then yeah, the different masses of different planets could potentially be treated as trapped energy. I am by no means no mathematician or physicist. I'm an aerospace engineer and maker, but from what I know about space-time, it sounds like you definitely have something there, man. And it comes down to you, just like everything that NASA talked about today. They can give us the plans, they can give us a good idea, but it needs to be executed. In NASA's sense, right, it's about making sure that all these programs and these contractors are aligned, and the things that are slowing them down from NASA's perspective need to be changed so that they can move as fast as they can. And going on the assumption that NASA has not been doing things the most efficiently, which is great, right? That's awesome for NASA to admit and be accountable for, so that then everyone else can also become accountable and move on. As far as you, my friend, with you're doing what Einstein did, right? That's a singular, in a lot of ways, workload, right? You are trying to write out an equation and proof it out, right, through mathematics. So your hard work is going to be putting in the time and the effort in running it through the scientific gambit, and then finding, once you get the math to a point, you have to, like Einstein did, find a real life example to test it. And with all these new space telescopes and other things, you'll have plenty of new data that you'll be able to estimate that. But yeah, I mean, that's where your hard work comes in. So I wish you all the best. Read up on Einstein, read up on Feynman, read up on Carl Sagan. Use them as inspiration for you to get the math down for your equation using space-time and estimating the mass of planets. I wish you all the best and luck. And also, don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate learning other things while you do that, right? Einstein, it was music. Find the other part of your brain too. That's going to help you get through the really hard, difficult stuff. So whatever that is for you, find it and then just put in the hard work. So best of luck with that. Andrew here says, after the end of the space shuttle era, everything turned off. NASA was silent. Yep. Being a kid at the time, NASA was rarely brought up. Now look at the times we're living in. Something to be excited for. Yeah, man. And imagine what it, for me, right? I'm a little bit older. So 2008, I went to college for aerospace engineering at Worcester Polytech Institute. And by my junior year, the space shuttle was retired. So literally the vehicle, or the first evolution of the vehicles that I would work on as an aerospace engineer, were retired. And then we basically started over trying to find another vehicle that would replace it, but not anything like the shuttle. And yes, in 2011 that happened, and then there was 3 years of a lot of unknown. And that was right around the time that I started the podcast, because it just felt like there was a lot of unknown. And at the time, think about the dichotomy of this, right? In 2012 to 2015, and even beyond, there were a limited amount of jobs that aerospace engineers could go to do this type of thing, right? And to think we're at a time where NASA is increasing its hiring, which then also means, because NASA will have more work, that means more contractors will have more work, and they're going to hire. So even though there are a lot of industries that are struggling tremendously right now, this, in the space industry, whether in your robotics, electronics, biology, chemistry, there's so many different facets, physics, so many things that can be done that are now hiring for the U.S. space program, whether it's NASA or related to NASA and the program, or because we're so lucky in the U.S. we have this space economy privately. Maybe it's just a private company doing it themselves, and then NASA might tag along or figure out how they can help. That's incredible to think that when I started this podcast, that was the farthest thing from what I could ever imagine would be the case 12 years later. I think it outpaces all of my hopes and dreams. So I am elated. And Andrew says, and yes, when Bob and Doug were launched to space from US Soul, I did indeed cry. Me too. That was not only was that a special moment, but that entire workforce did that while under pandemic restrictions, right? So we were in the midst of it, and they all worked together and got Bob and Doug to launch on the Crew Dragon for that demo flight and docked with the space station and gave us America's own spacecraft launched from our own soil, that we could finally send our astronauts back after the space shuttle was retired. And in a lot of ways, if NASA had been more straightforward, like this administration's space program is being, we wouldn't have been in the situation where we had 9 years between our own human-rated space vehicles. And so it really can't be understated that this type of leadership, the way that Jared Isaacman specifically is going about this, is something to be watched. If you fancy yourself a leader or are interested in leadership, I think he's a very important case study, and I think we're very lucky that he is as good a leader as he is, because the moment calls for it. So it's been a great day. So unless there's any other questions, any other things you'd like to say, folks, thank you so much for joining us. We've been streaming like crazy, and it has been glorious. NASA's plan, looks solid. We're going to find out over the next few days, months, weeks. But while all that stuff is happening, we're also going to see Artemis 2 launch right now, April Fool's Day, April 1st. So that will be interesting. It's very possible it gets pushed out. But within that first week of April, we're going to see the NASA astronauts take flight for the free trajectory around the moon and back, the figure 8 around the moon and back. That will be very awesome. And then, of course, there's an amazing movie out right now, Project Hail Mary. Not an ad, but it's awesome. So you should go see it. I will be in the next week. Looking forward to hear what you think about it. But until then, thank you for joining us. Spread love and spread science. Stay curious. And we'll see you on the next episode of Today in Space.